Hey kids, howdy and welcome. Once again, it is time for Conscious Embodiment, Astrology, and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. Zoe and I are here, as we are each week, bringing you the astrology in a dream. How's the whole double retrograde treating you, Zoe?
So far, it's okay, but
All
I'm
right.
like,
Yeah. It's
not stellar, but I'm not no big bumps just
all right.
yet.
Good.
Yeah.
We'll talk all about it in today's podcast. But before we get to that, I want to make an announcement. I'm going to talk about it every week, leading up to and after my Astro Overview 2025. I do this every year on New Year's Day live. So if you want to come and spend a couple hours with me on New Year's Day at 10 a.m. Pacific time, I'm going to do about a 3-hour deep dive into all of 2025's astrology. Now, I do this every year, but I'm doing something new that I've never done before. There are handouts, and I mean like 15 pages of handouts.
Wow,
I broke
thought it'd be
down
like
some
three.
of the,
That's a lot of
no,
worksheet.
I really wanted to go all in. It's going to be such a challenging year of change in ways that we don't really know how how next year's going to feel. It's kind of like, being at the end of 2019 going, everything's changing in 2020. And people are like, well, what do you mean? I'd be like, well, I don't know, like we've never seen before. And it's a little bit like that next year with all three outer planets changing signs. So I thought I would support you guys with a little bit more detail that you can have to refer to during the year. So there's a bunch of handouts describing different retrogrades and certain big pieces of geometry. And then there's a 12-page, monthly outline describing everything of importance for the entire year. It felt good, actually, to do, although it was so much work to get all of that outlined in such a way that I feel like it's detailed enough and accurate and error-free. At any rate, enough about this. If you want to join me on New Year's Day Live, absolutely go to michaellennox.com and get your seat. If you want to use the recording to inch through this at another time, your purchased seat for January 1st also includes the recording and the handouts. So check that out at michaellennox.com. This is from Rebecca, who writes, "Thank you for your weekly insight. You and Zoe have been part of my weekly morning routine for a while now. I deeply appreciate it and look forward to each episode. I've recently had an astrologer express to me that when they cast a solar return chart, they now use, I love that now, meaning they've changed their mind, they now use the current location of the person at the time of their solar return. For example, if they were born in Chicago but now live in LA, they would cast the solar return chart as Chicago anyway, instead of using the current LA residence. This confused me at the time. It wasn't an appropriate moment for me to express my curiosity. It has been in the back of my mind of late, though, as I contemplate my own solar return chart. I would love to know your thoughts on this, as my, air quotes, logical thinking mind wants to say the solar return chart would more accurately reflect this year's experience when using the location one is currently in at the moment." And then she talks a little bit more about her own specific chart. So this is an interesting question in terms of like what astrologers prefer. Now, I have to confess, and I think I've talked about this on previous episodes, I don't work with solar returns on the regular. Part of why I don't is that in my past years, as I was, learning and growing in astrology and would, park into one technique or another for a little while and explore it, working with solar returns never felt deeply satisfying. Now, part of this is not because they're not good or they're not right or they don't work. I try to convey this all the time, that I use astrology and teach it from the perspective of my own inner process of self-investigation and moving through life, and that means transits are what I'm really focused on. And in sessions, it's about the progress chart, which is a whole other technique in astrology. There is a solar return technique that many people feel strongly about, where they decide what kind of a year they want to have from their birthday to birthday, because solar return is expressing that. That's what a solar return chart is. It's the moment in the current year when the sun is at the place it was exactly at your birth. So, like, for instance, my birthday is August 23rd, but my solar return is usually on the 22nd, because that's when the sun is back to 29 degrees, 57 minutes of Leo. So that's what a solar return describes, the 12 months of the birthday to birthday year. So the technique is that people will go to locations to put the solar return sun in a certain house in their natal chart. Like, I'm going to go to Zimbabwe for my birthday because I want a boyfriend, and that puts the solar return sun in my 7th house. And I always thought that was the stupidest motherfucking thing I'd ever heard. Like, you're going to go travel someplace to receive an imprint of an energy at your solar return, but then go back to Los Angeles where you live, and you're going to receive the energy of the year day to day in that latitude and longitude. Much like what Rebecca was considering, that shouldn't your solar return reflect the location you're living in, not impacted by going some other place to manipulate your solar return? So I don't believe in that. I think it's a silly idea. When I do solar return charts, on the rare occasions that I do, and every year I look at my own, it's not like I don't look at it. I just don't work with it day to day during the year. I'll glance at it near my birthday and be like, oh, what an interesting story that chart is telling. But I do believe that if you're going to work with solar return charts, you should, in fact, work with the location where the person is living and dwelling. For those who know a little bit more about astrology, I'll add this, that in progressed charts, I use the birthplace location. In other words, for like my story, born upstate New York, live in Los Angeles. When I look at my progressed chart, it's not relocated to here. I use my birth location. And why I'm really thinking that that's the way to go is because in my birth location, my rising sign just changed by progression in the last year and a half into Pisces, and that makes sense for how I'm operating in the world. Whereas if you transfer me to LA, the progressed rising is Capricorn, and that I don't identify with at all. So with progressed charts reflecting your inner growth through life, I say use the birthplace. For solar return charts, use your living space to cast that chart. So if you're listening to today's episode when it comes out, it's the 9th of December. Mars turned around on the 6th. So we start the week with both Mercury and Mars retrograde since last Friday through the end of this week when Mercury turns around on Sunday and goes direct. Double retrograde from the planet that represents our embodiment and the planet that represents our mind and perceptions is a shit show. They're both in fire signs, which means they're more activated in a way than if they were in, air, earth, or water. Fire is about movement, and combustion is sort of akin to, making things out in the world. So I think that makes a doubly debilitating retrograde, especially while Mars is in Leo and Mercury's in Sag. So from last Friday through the Sunday up ahead, we're in some difficulty in both movement, action, decision-making, communication, conversations, negotiations. It's a shit show in waiting, ready to sort of happen.
I'm not looking forward to that.
Mars is also barely moving. He will move a little faster in his backward motion. It's a 2-month backward process. But when any personal planet retrogrades or goes direct, the slowdown is epic in both directions. In other words, Mars slowed down at 5-6 degrees of Leo before he turned around. And now that he's turned around, he's still at 5-6 Leo. He has not moved with any significance since he turned around. So that's what makes the double retrograde more bumpy this week. Isn't just that the two planets are in the below and sort of more involved in our unconscious and our conscious awareness, but Mars is like stock still in the sky because he just turned around. And Mercury will do the same thing. Really, like he's slowing down to go direct on Sunday because the planet will slow down in both the direct and the retrograde portions of the moving cycle. So you basically have two planets that dictate almost, a third of our experience in the world, our body and our mind, not moving. So just know that, and there's no Mercury shenanigans that can't be gotten through with a little laugh and a breath and a pause and, maybe a second try.
Would this show up as like you're trying to do something and it's going slower than you thought, or it's
Absolutely. That's one way of going, of describing what might be possible. There's a drag on the system. A lot of astrologers talk about a lot of drag on the system when outer and social planets are retrograde, and I call bullshit on that. I don't think we feel that at all. I've said that 1,000 times, but you can bet your ass that when it's the personal planets, we can't move as fast if the impetus that reflects our movement and thinking and negotiating are both backward. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. It's not just that they're retrograde, it's that they're stationing. They're not moving at all. So just, know that as you move through the week and just expect delays and redos and, you'll be fine. There's something interesting that this Mercury retrograde cycle is doing with Venus. And in some ways, I'm not exactly sure how to predict in advance what this is going to mean for people. So I'm just going to outline it, and you'll know as we move through this week. So here's what the interesting thing is. The retrograding Mercury is sextiling Venus this week. There won't be a triple transit because Venus is a personal planet. She's just going to keep going. But it does mean that there's something that will come up in this week, towards the end of the week, Thursday's the day this peaks, that might be an important Mercury retrograde deliverance of a piece of information that has something to do with love and intimacy and how you're living in your heart. Now, why this is interesting to mention in the retrograde cycle is in January, third week, they'll do this again from different signs now. Mercury will be in Capricorn, Venus will be exalted in Pisces. So there's just a way in which this retrograde might have some information for people who are in some kind of a relational narrative that feels important. So don't overthink this. Just glance at your world Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And if there's something important that comes up that is mental and communicative in nature, but that relates to your intimacy life, there might be a second visit of the themes in January. There's a pace-setting transit that's been present since the summer that wraps up this month. This year has not had a lot of transits between the social and outer planets, but there have been a couple, and one that hits this week that also hit in the beginning of August is a sesquisquare between Jupiter and Pluto. Jupiter in his move. I'm so trying not to gender the planets anymore. 10 years ago, I've been gendering the planets for 30 years. It's just my archetypal, thinking, right? And 10 years ago, I can remember getting positive feedback for gendering the planets. People would say to me, oh, thank you for gendering, calling the moon and Venus a she. And now I just want to change that just because we're living in a new world and it feels like an old It makes me feel like a 61-year-old man.
Just
You know,
like gendering is dated.
Yeah, like it's just it just in that 25 years ago when I was like steeped in my early astrology, the gendering was helpful to understand the archetypal energy. We live in a world that's changing on the outside with respect to gender, and I want to respond to that as much as I can because I am an old white man. I don't want to let go of some of my traditional perceptions about fill in the blank. So, Jupiter and its movement,
There you go.
it's always about our manifestation, right? The things we want to create in the world outside is governed by Jupiter and its movement. Saturn, of course, creates the structures on top of which we build the yummy things that help us dance. That's Jupiter. Pluto means change and transformation. Both of these things are great, right? Change is important, and manifestation is one of the joys of living in a body. But the 135-degree sesquisquare dictates that the energy for creation and manifestation since the summer has been held back by just a general atmosphere of frustration, of things not moving quite fast enough for your comfort. And because this is the second and last hit of it, stands to reason that in the months to come, whatever slowdowns, breakdowns, frustrations that were being reflected by this transit will dissipate. Now, this is a very minor transit, so it's, when they're big transits, I can say, oh, what broke down in the summer? And everybody will go, well, this broke down or that broke down. This is subtler. So I can't give you examples of it. I can just say, if you felt frustrated by the pace of movement, in the next month or so, you might feel less so.
Okay.
The full moon in Gemini is this weekend. It's exact at around 1:02 a.m. on Sunday. So the dark of the moon is all day Saturday, and when we wake up on Sunday, the illumination will have peaked, making both days, at least from my time zone here in the Pacific west of the United States, the whole weekend is very full moon-ish. Because the moon is in Gemini, it's ruled by Mercury. With the sun in Sagittarius, we're in consideration of all of the expansions we desire, all of the abundance potential. Jupiter rules this sign. I talk a lot about how I love that when it's getting darker here in the Northern Hemisphere, we go into the mansion that asks us to find all of the expansion possibilities inside of us so that when we get back to the light of spring, we've got some clarity of what we want to create. But Mercury is stationing. In fact, he goes retrograde on Sunday, but not at the moment of the full moon. He'll go direct like 12 hours later in the middle of the afternoon on Sunday, Pacific time. So with the moon representing our unconscious in the land of ideas and words and communication and perception, the fact that Mercury is looking into the unconscious while the full moon activation hits and then turns around 12 hours later and goes direct, there's something elegant about that. I'm reminded of Jack Horner and his thumb. You may be too young for this reference, but there was an old nursery rhyme. Jack Horner sits in the corner eating his Christmas pie. He stuck in his thumb. He pulled out a plum and said, oh, what a clever boy am I. That's just an image from my childhood that I think of sometimes when Mercury is retrograde, that there are ideas that are swimming in the under the surface areas of our conscious that the retrograding Mercury can have us gain access to. Right? This is what we talk about during the inferior conjunction when the retrograding Mercury and the sun come together. That's Jack Horner sticking his thumb in saying, ooh, what did I learn? What am I learning in this retrograde? And so the same thing is sort of be said of the station. When Mercury turns around, the fact that he's doing it in tandem with a full moon, where the full moon is saying, what do you have to let go of in your perceptions and your idea of what is true in order to live a life where you get to share your ideas with others in the world in a powerful and beautiful way? This is the full moon to get rid of monkey mind and overthinking and anxious thoughts that sort of harsh your buzz.
That's something I need to do, get rid of monkey mind.
Well, the prayer in the full moon would be something like, help me release anything that I am focused on that inhibits my true expansion, and blah, blah, blah. So it is, right? That language is Gemini moon. Let me focus in the unconscious of why and where and how my perceptions are in the wrong place in order for me to manifest my true Sagittarius desires. Everything's a perception game in the world. It's all about perception. And when we can clean up and discipline what we're letting our mind think about, we have more graceful lives because we're now in control of the one thing we can control: your thoughts and what you focus on. Not the first one. I'm fond of saying you can't control the impulsive, fearful, angry, raging, whatever thought that comes up. But your staying with those thought patterns is completely within your ability to discipline and shift and change. I'm fairly committed to teaching a class next year on disciplining the mind.
That would be great.
Asked for this. Oh, no, people have been asking for it. I'm perfectly designed to teach it. I'm not quite sure why I haven't done so yet, but this full moon is all about that.
I think I'm definitely going to be using this mantra because, like, in this world of, endless TV and cute little videos, I get really distracted.
Yes, well, and that can lead me, Zoe, to the next thing I need to say about this lunation that's really, really powerful. Chiron holds our wounded consciousness, and Black Moon Lilith represents the aspects of shadow that we're so afraid of. We try to tamp it down and keep it in the box. It's like, no, I won't look at that scary idea. In this full moon, Chiron and Black Moon Lilith are opposing each other. Oppositions are dynamic interactions that cannot be avoided. Now, you don't know whether the opposition will engage a crash or a dance, but something will have to happen between wounds and shadow. Black Moon Lilith is in Libra right now. As such, the shadow material that is held in the Libra mansion is challenges with relationship, where we go into sabotage or wounded, patterns showing up in relationships. The shadow of passivity, of not taking action. Anything that you can think of that would be a shadow of the Libra harmony and balance, like people pleasing or even just being afraid to look at the darker stuff below. Libra would say, no, let's keep things sort of, balanced and harmonious. And this opposition interacts with the geometry of the full moon really beautifully. The moon will trine Black Moon and sextile Chiron. The sun will sextile Black Moon Lilith and trine Chiron. So what that means is, though this backdrop of wound and shadow facing off to each other is the thing that the moon and the sun are asking us to do, right? Back to this idea of what unconscious thought patterns that you might know what they're saying to you underneath the surface, but you can sometimes know that an unconscious pattern is up when you are compulsively escaping. That the mind will do that. I'm troubled by something I don't want to think about, so I, smoke some weed and watch TikTok videos for 3 hours instead of, right? Yeah. So Built into this full moon is a demand to go into the below spaces, find some of the shadowy ways that you're inhibiting your ability to share your ideas powerfully out there in the world, and use whatever release rituals that, light you up to focus on that which needs to go. One of the nice things about anything that involves Gemini is that words are Gemini's way of expressing the wisdom that sign contains, which means we can use our words to navigate through what this full moon is asking us to release. So get out your journals, do some automatic writing, write specifically about patterns are part of your history, and sort of just check in with yourself through your thinking and reflection. And Mercury retrograde helps that self-reflection happen in order to have a powerful release through this full moon. There's always a million things I could say about any full moon, but there's two more I want to add before we wrap it up. One is the relationship between the sun and Uranus during this full moon. So the sun is our conscious awareness, and Uranus is the upgrade to our conscious awareness, the great awakener. Because they're holding the inconjunct, the track change energy, there is assistance from higher realms to release something instantaneously and forever, because that's what Uranus brings, sudden and acute change that happens all at once, right? So there's support for a radical shift in releasing old perceptions that don't serve. And in the spirit of Mercury giving us Jack Horner's plum as Sunday turns into Monday, there's a beautiful grand fire trine being held by the retrograding Mercury, who's turning direct, Mars retrograde in Leo. That's beautiful. The fact that these two planets that are fucking us all up by both being retrograde at the same time, at least during this full moon, they're harmonizing with each other. So that means whatever Mercury is ready to deliver us as we come out of this retrograde includes some wisdom from Mars in his process that might take a few months for us to sort of acclimate to, because Mars has got a lot more to go. But I love the fact that they are trining each other, backward moving, during the peak of the full moon. And then the third corner of the grand fire trine that I'm talking about is the north node of the moon. The future that we're all trying to build is represented by the north node. Grand fire trines are about manifestation into the world of form through action and charisma and creativity and movement. Now, the retrogrades say, not quite yet.
Like, we're slow it. Keep it slow.
Well, yeah. So I'm sharing this with you guys because the message is there that mind, Mercury, body, Mars, and where we're going next are in fact harmonizing right now. But because mind and body are retrograde, even with Mercury going direct Sunday afternoon, we're still in a position where anything that might be happening in your unconscious during this lunar cycle might not be understood by you and integrated by you until, Mars finishes up his retrograde of, December and January, and his wrap up beyond. Okay, so there's one last little thing to say about Mercury turning around on Sunday. He is entering the third act wrap-up that we call the direct shadow. Direct because Mercury will be direct starting Sunday afternoon. Shadow because he's traveling over degree points that he's hit not once, but twice before. So we call this the wrap-up. The first time we look at Mercury's movement before he turns around, we call that the retrograde shadow. That's the brochure that tells us what the process is going to be like. The backward motion is the juicy, chunky part that we're in all week. And then when we get to next week, and I might mention this at the top of next week's podcast, there won't be any of the wrap-up triple transits in the week that follows. The last week in December, they all come back full tilt. And so we'll be talking about that at the top of that last week of December's podcast. But just know that though Mercury turns around, there is nothing retrograde to pay attention to in the week that's coming next week. But trust me, things that came up during the backward motion will absolutely be revisited a week from now. More about that when we get there. Meanwhile, have at it.
Did you know that Michael has a daily Astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily Astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show.
This week we have an email and dream from Leanne. Leanne adds a bit of context as well. So she says,
Great.
Hi, Dr. Michael. I've been listening to you for a few months and love hearing the dream section. I also love watching the Instagram Red Robe Astrology shorts. That's how I found you.
Love that.
For a few years now, I've been mindfully unlocking a deeply seated, unknown cause of anxiety and fear that's affecting my choices and life. This dream seems like it's a step to uncovering it. So here's her dream.
Okay.
Last night, I had a dream about a tomb I and others were building for me. I was a thin, tall man with a beard, and the tomb was not finished. We were in a hurry. It was dark, and my partner, her husband, had a headlamp, but it was losing power. He quickly, messily, and loosely wrapped my arms and torso with wide white tape. I was being buried, sort of alive, like a mummy.
Yeah, it sounds mummy.
Yeah.
She says
Like,
it. Okay,
she
yeah,
says
no,
like a
that's mummy. Without a doubt, she's being mummified in this dream for sure. Wide white tape, that absolutely, and hubby's nearby with the light that's dimming. All right,
I
ready.
remember
Keep
not
going.
feeling bound, but drugged by something and calm. I was standing up in the slot under the dirt/stone floor they were to lay me in, dying, not feeling fear or discomfort. The other person did not have my husband's face, but it was him. Yeah.
Got it.
He was with me. I saw his face, and it was wet and grimacing, with his eyes closed, and I was kissing it over and over with extreme sadness.
Got it. Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
I heard a helicopter sound. We know they were to seal the tomb with concrete, and he had to get out. I woke up not dead, and the other person had not left or sealed the tomb. Also, I was first person as a man and also third person on and off. So she was like being the first person and third person. I felt like I was the one being buried. Then I was watching myself getting wrapped with the white tape. It flitted around so fast. I may have been the other man sometimes as well. I also remember some hieroglyph type symbols etched into the walls of stone, and it was a dome. The floor was stone and dirt, and my resting place was under the floor in a uncomfortably small cubby. Could this have been a past life remembrance that
Hmm.
created a deep fear of being left alone?
What was that last thing you said just before could this be?
Yeah, so where she was to be placed was like there was a dirt and stone floor, and her resting place was to be under the floor in a small cubby.
Oh, God. Stream is triggering my
Oh my god.
claustrophobia. Um,
Okay, and then she adds some stuff, and then I'll put this I'll put this end thing. All
mhm.
right. I was unsettled when I woke up, but I wasn't feeling claustrophobic yet in this dream. It was going in that direction. Like past dreams I have had before, when the spaces I go into get smaller and smaller until I wake up with my heart pounding. And I guess I was holding my
Oh.
breath. Did I get buried alive in a past life?
Mm,
Any
mm.
input would be very helpful in unlocking this deep mystery fear I deal with, and hopefully to get free and live and breathe properly.
Mm. Well, let's certainly start with the idea that this sounds like a past life dream.
Like, you think, not
Right.
just because she said, you think it also sounds.
No, this sounds to me like a past
Oh,
life dream. And
interesting.
how I determine that, and I talk about it in Psychic Dreamer, the new book about mystical dreaming experiences. Past life dreams have to have some sort of cogency to another time or realm or neighborhood or
Hmm.
something, right? Dreams by nature are chaotic and crazy and take us all over the place in ways that don't make sense in the narrative of them. This dream does. It's one scenario, it's one activity. The two people in the dream are engaged in that activity, and there's a cogency to the experience. The dream isn't chaotically taking us to the clown car or the upside down place or the way the dreams can. So, in my life of hearing dreams, I began to notice certain things, and this was one of them, that I would hear a dream that would be like this, and I would say, gee, I wonder if this is a past life dream. Now, I don't know that we've been other people in past lives. I know that there are people who believe this utterly. There are billions of people who have a whole culture and religious structure around the idea that we karmically return life to life until we get our karmic lessons. I like to live in a notion of, if it's a mystery, I respect that it's a mystery, even if I speak into what that mystery might be.
So, leaving your past life in the past.
Well, no. Meaning I don't know
Got it.
if we've been people in the past, and I can't sit here and speak into it as if like that's how I believe. I always sit in the chair of, the mystery is a mystery, and our job isn't to say we know what the mystery is and what's behind it, because that's not possible for the human mind to do, full stop. But we make up stories and myths about what might be, and those stories and myths are often based on people's individual real life experiences. So I respect that above and beyond. So I might sit in this chair of half scientist, half mystic, and say to you, my listening audience, I respect the mystery, but I'll speak to you, Leanne. This sounds like a past life dream. So then what's the value of a past life connection, whether you believe that we've been other individuals along the history of time itself, or you believe, as I'm inclined to believe, that in consciousness, in a body, we all have access to everything that ever was, is, and will be. So that when Leanne goes into dreamland, or maybe she's had a past life regression, or somebody has, a life will come up that is germane to the current life's struggle. And then I do believe that there's some veracity to it, that in that mysterious place in consciousness, I do believe we go places that are hard for our rational minds to understand. So let's just accept, for the sake of this dream interpretation, that Leanne was, in fact, tombed up alive somehow. maybe she was thought to be dead and, was mummified alive, but then the coma, broke and, she wasn't, that old saying, saved by the bell. That's from when they didn't always know when someone was dead, and they put people in coffins sometimes and they woke up, so they put a little bell in, so just in case someone wasn't really dead, they could ring the bell and they'd be rescued.
Oh.
Anyway, I'm just throwing out there this idea that Leanne identifies with having this deep, deep fear and anxiety. I do have claustrophobia, so I know from what it's like to be in my body feeling one way and all of a sudden have this sort of panic close in on me, that I could certainly imagine my feeling in my body would be a little bit like being, trapped in a tomb. So the value of going into that past life space is not that different from the shadow work that I teach. I teach that if you have a wound in earlier life that's still stuck in your body somewhere, you can't live fully free until you have revisited that wounded space in a sort of PTSD fashion, feel the feelings of that pain again, but add to it love and breath and your current consciousness and the intention to heal. And by visiting those earlier places, a la shadow work, you release something that was held in your body back in an earlier time in your physical experience of being alive. Well, this is just that at a meta level. That there is some existential, mysteriously connected to Leanne essential feeling that may not be hers exactly, but that she has to carry. The past life dream takes her to that place in consciousness where that fear of being suffocated lives on some level. I think it's interesting that there's this other person that is at times has the face of her husband and other times doesn't.
But she still knows it's him.
Knows it's him. That certainly tells a story of past lives where people helped each other in other lifetimes and now. So that's an interpretation I can't escape from, that looks to me like hubby was not only with her in this life, but with her in that life. In fact, in the pairing of what each of them carry in this devastating place, now I see a connection between current life Leanne and husband going into this past life place, that light on the helmet that's dimming. That's a very modern construct. That's not hieroglyphics and domes and, you know what I mean? Like, they didn't have lights on construction hats thousands of years ago in Egypt, right? So that, to me, shows a current sensibility with a past life partner who's helping Leanne see what needs to be seen. I think the idea that she wakes up not dead and the tomb not sealed, I would rather hold that as evidence of the healing is in process. That if this was a past life, it's very unlikely that she woke up not dead and the tomb not sealed, right? It's more likely that she's dead and the tomb is sealed. But waking up in the dream that Leanne is having in 2024, there's a shift happening in the devastation of the smaller and smaller and being tucked into tiny little enclosed places that elicit panic. That something is happening in the healing journey, that we're meeting Leanne not at the beginning of this work, but somewhere in the middle of it. And I do believe that indeed tapping into these places, whether they are bona fide past lives or not, they are certainly images that Leanne's soul and psyche wants her to play with as it relates to this baffling and challenging experience of deeply seated anxiety and fear that impacts the way she moves through her life. By the way, not for nothing, this is a perfect dream to be part and parcel to a full moon in Gemini, because if there's anxiety and fearful thoughts, that's an invention of Gemini. So we're all, Leanne included, in a week where it is possible that the solar system will help us all offload some of the fearful thoughts that we carry along with us out of habit.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.